Okay, we added. The cluster share volume is online, and as you can see, the mount point is C cluster storage volume 1. So now we are ready to go ahead and configure the first virtual machine on this R2 cluster. Here's a major difference between the previous builds and this one. We have better integration between the failover cluster manager and the Hyper-V manager. So I can go on services and application, virtual machines, new virtual machine. I'm running on Nacre 001, so I will create it on 001. But you can choose any node of the cluster to create the machine in question. So the wizard for the creation of the virtual machine comes straight from Hyper-V Manager. Just click on Next, give it a name, Test VM2, for instance. Now we want to make sure that we put it on the cluster share volume, cluster storage volume 1. I'll give it a gigabyte worth of RAM. And at this point, we want to make sure that we connect it to the proper network. Now, the default is not connected. I have two networks that I've defined previously on both nodes of the cluster using Hyper-V Manager. One is called public and the other is called private. And the public network just connects to the public interface of our cluster. And we let the virtual machine get a DHCP address and register itself with DNS services that sit elsewhere on the corporate network. Now, again, I want to make sure that you create these public-facing networks before you actually go ahead and create a cluster. That's to avoid any possible confusion with network interfaces used by the cluster versus network interfaces used by the virtual machines. Ideally, you would have another network card that carries virtual machine traffic, not used for administering the cluster. In this case, we have 3, and we'll have to make do with those 3. 2 is the minimum number. 3 is better because you separate iSCSI traffic. 4 is even better if you want to separate virtual machine traffic. So I can create a virtual hard disk, or I can mount an existing virtual hard disk. At this point, I will attach a virtual hard disk later to save some time, and it's a hard disk that I've prepared before for the purpose of this demonstration. It just contains a simple Server 2008 virtual machine. So I create my virtual machine here, finish, and it is a success. We finish this. So bear with me whilst I go ahead and add the virtual hard disk that I've created before to this virtual machine. In order to do that, I right click, check Manage Virtual Machine, which brings me straight ahead into Hyper-V Manager and highlights my virtual machine that I've just created. So as with any other virtual machine, I go into Settings, where it says IDE Controller 0. I want to add a hard drive, and it's a VHD file that I can find under C Cluster Storage Volume 1 Test VM2, and I've prepared before. There we go. We can see the network adapter is connected to the public network. And whilst we're here, we might as well have a look at the network as it is defined. Public network is connected to this physical network card that is the same that we're using for the cluster access point. Okay, at this point, I can close Hyper-V Manager and go ahead and start my virtual machine. So bear with me whilst the virtual machine boots. starting online, I can go ahead and connect straight from the failover cluster manager interface. So see all the advances that we've done in the integration. And the virtual machine is booting. So I will pause the recording and save you some time there. So the virtual machine is booted. I can now go and log into it. This is a VM that I have prepared before. It's not in particular, just Server 2008 vanilla installation, not joined to a domain or anything. And I just want to make sure that it has gotten an IP address and everything. It looks like it has. What you're seeing here is test mode because I have already pre-installed the virtual machine drivers, the so-called integration components for this particular build of Server 2008. Of course, when we release the product, you will not see this test mode. So I want to go ahead and check the IP address of this virtual machine, which is simply achieved with ipconfig. And you can see the IP address here, which I'm going to use to remote desktop into the VM. Bear with me whilst I launch a remote desktop to do that. Here we go. We have a remote desktop session which I launched from my PC as a client of this particular virtual machine. And in order to show you that it is exactly the same, you see the same screenshot here that you saw on a test VM2. So let's close this connection and go back to the remote desktop and kick off some activity on this virtual machine, such as, for instance, Internet Explorer with Hulu. Let's launch a video. Family Guy, I particularly like it. It's me, basically. And make sure the video plays. And while the video is playing, I'm gonna minimize this very briefly. Go ahead and kick off a live migration of this virtual machine. So note that the machine is now running on Duckray 001. I want to do a live migrate to Duckray 002. Kick the process off and go back to my machine here. And as you can see, the video keeps playing very happily. No interruption of service whatsoever. Now give it a couple more seconds, then we'll go back and check whether it's done the live migration or not. So the video is still playing. Let's minimize. And here you go. We see that the machine has moved to Duckray 002. There's been absolutely no interruption of service, and you've been enjoying a short piece of the Family Guy. So that basically concludes my demonstration and this video. Thank you very much.